Okay, Jet fans, we got breaking news. We got breaking news as of 8 hours ago. As of about 10, 11 o'clock this morning, Wilks got wilksed. Yeah, Steve Wilks got the axe. And so this is something that we talked about. This is going to be on our little panel over here, our docket. Today is Monday, December the 15th, 2025, and Wilks got wilksed. He's the king of the one and dones. And, the thing that, now we talked about this on Sunday morning, and then I talked about it in my reaction video to the game, saying I think Wilks is now definitely going to be the sacrificial lamb. Did not know it was going to happen the next day, but it had become clear that his time here was coming to an end. And I think one of the things that was a clue was that Aaron Glenn, in one of his post-game pressers, said, yeah, I brought Wilks here to run his system. His system. And so I think there was probably some regret about that. I mean, you would think about it logically. You would say, AG, just bring the system that you ran in Detroit, bring it here. It's a 4-down front. Just run that here. What do you have to mess around with any other system? Worked pretty good over there once you got some players. And but I think, and some of the reporting by Country Club Connor Hughes and Zach Rosenblather and some of these other people, and you got to pay attention now to the beat reporters because you got to read between the lines. You got to read their tea leaves because they do have sources. They do have information. They do have information that they can't report until X, Y, or Z happens. And that's the annoying part with these fuckers. But what they said was that, the Jets were all set to run Glenn's system. But then at some point that changed and there became a combo idea with Wilks' system. Which is also stupid because the Saleh system and the Glenn system are very close together, very similar. Maybe a little extra blitzing here, a little man coverage there, but it was very similar. And then to go into whatever the Wilks system was, I don't know anybody who could figure out the Wilks system. And as we talked about all the last few months, some of the dumb things that Wilks has said, the defensive backs are going to drive the bus of our defense. What? No. The people who drive the bus of your defense is the defensive line. They're the drivers. Especially in a 4-down system. Now, in a 3-4 system, you want to say the linebackers are the drivers. Okay. But this was a 4-down system. And so if it's going to be some sort of weird combo where they're doing God knows what, they're not just one-gapping and keeping it simple, then I don't know why you're implementing a 4-down system. That's what almost all 4-down systems do. And the more creative systems, you could say, whether it's a Brian Flores or a Winky Dink Martindale or a, one of these or what the Ravens traditionally run, you want to say those kind of systems, those are 3-4 systems with linebackers who are kind of like defensive linemen, those hybrid types on the ends. And those are typically your more creative double-A mug, fronts, amoeba front, this and that. The creative fronts and things are typically based out of a 3-4, whereas a 4-3 is a more simple, this is obviously very simplified. 4-3 is your simplified one-gapping system. So what Wilks was doing, I don't think anybody knew, but he must have convinced Glenn, and I think to at least run some sort of a combo system. And I think it's a good sign that Glenn admitted to himself and to everybody else, okay, this was a mistake. And if I had to guess, I would think he's going to go back to his old system, which he probably wanted to run and was talked out of by Wilks, seems to me. So we'll have to see what becomes of it. But you could tell that the players are confused. First of all, Quincy said, yeah, this system, much more complicated than Saleh Ulbrecht. And that's fine if your players can run it. But it became clear that no, instead we got a confederacy of dunces out there, and you got to keep it simple for them. And as annoying as that may be for the fans watching, if it works, it works. But certainly this didn't work, and maybe we just didn't have the right kind of players. But part of being a great coach is tailoring your system to the players you have, not the players you wish you had. The players you have to work for your system. And if Quincy and Sherwood and all these people who I believe are good players and just played poorly this year, if they're not getting it, then you got to tailor your system to them. You can't. I mean, we tried everything. We benched Quincy. We benched Sherwood. This last game, apparently, we benched Jermaine Johnson. He didn't start the game and only played 27 snaps or something like that. So what are we doing? What is the point of that? You're trying to make them get something, but maybe they just can't get it. Maybe you need to change as the coach, and so you see the change, and it had to be made. Whatever Wilks was doing, maybe he's a genius at drawing it up in the lab, but when it comes to actually implementing it on the field, it's not so good. So at least in this case, it was not. So we'll see what happens. Now, in terms of and this is also recollects of something that happened in Detroit. So AG was formed in Detroit for the most part, and New Orleans, and a lot of other places. But what happened in Detroit, if you recall, Dan Campbell fired Anthony Lynn. I believe it was the first year. And he took over play calling himself, and he said, I got this Ben Johnson guy, but he's in the wings. He's not ready yet, which, looking back, is kind of funny because he's doing so well with the Bears. But Ben Johnson's not ready yet. I'll take the play calling, and we got to fire this Anthony Lynn. We got to get rid of him, and that was a mistake, and we'll just fix it. And eventually they got on track, and they eventually gave it to Ben Johnson, and everything started rolling. So this is kind of similar to that. And it's good to see that AG could admit a mistake. Listen, this is a first-time head coach. He's going to make mistakes. Maybe the rest of the staff he got right, but maybe he screwed up Wilks. All right. Look, at least he wasn't stubborn about it. You know, the way I look at it, at least he wasn't stubborn about it. And he just said, screwed that up. All right. Get rid of this guy, and we'll try something new. Now, the other thing to keep in mind with the media, as I've been telling you, the character assassination comes first, and then they get fired. What has been happening over the past month? All the media members, character assassination on Steve Wilks, and then boom, he's fired. So that helps us to read the tea leaves when the media members have been given the directive, okay, character assassinate this guy, whoever it may be. We can start to say, okay, it's probably the end for that guy. Because remember, the point of the media is to get the public ready for some event. Usually it's, some war the government wants to start or some policy objective. But in sports, it's something like this. The media is used to prepare the public for some outcome that they may not like. In this case, we probably wouldn't have cared, but that is the point of the media. As I have on the ticker about, manufacturing consent, you should buy that book and read it. You'll understand. And then you could kind of see things coming ahead of time. Now, there are also technique changes that some people were pointing out, including Joe Blewett. Like they were pointing out Quinnen Williams' stance and things like that from when he was on the Jets to when he went over to the Cowboys and he went back to old Aaron Whitecotton, his old coach, and also Solly Thomas over there. And also Charcuterie Board is a coach over there, too. So a lot of ex-Jets over there with the Cowboys. And they said as soon as Quinnen got over there, he went back to his old stance. And he started having more success than what he was doing with the Jets this year. Kind of explaining why he didn't have much production this year. And that's terrible. That's a terrible indictment of Steve Wilks. To take Quinnen and not use him properly? Are you kidding me? What? Let's take one of the best players in the league and let's alter his stance. Let's change him around. Let's make him do something he doesn't like to do. What? What kind of crap is that? Because I have a theory. It sounds brilliant. Wait till you hear it, Frankie. Yeah, it's called He Stinks Now. Thanks, Wilks. Jesus Christ, man. And then on top of that, you not only have bright lights like Blewett pointing things out as well, but then you have people like, Ross Tucker on the broadcast saying, look, they're killing him with play action. They're killing him in the middle of the field stuff. Look, the linebackers are biting too hard on the play action, and then they're just throwing it over their heads. Simple as a pimple. Well, if Ross Tucker can figure it out, why can't Steve Wilks? Now you can say, well, Glenn should figure that. Yeah, but he was leaving. He was trying to delegate that out to Wilks, and so look, it didn't. It didn't work. It clearly didn't work. Whatever Wilks was doing, whatever genius plan he had up his sleeve, he couldn't, roll it out on the field to make it work. So, especially when there are good players, Jermaine Johnson, Harrison Phillips, Jawan Briggs, Will McDonald to a certain extent, Quincy Williams, Jamian Sherwood, Brandon Stevens, Sauce when we had him, Quinnen when we had him. These are good players, good to great, to some varying degree. And while I've been telling you that it's not good enough to compete, which it isn't, because you need much more than that. You got to roll 8 deep in a 4-down system, not 8 deep in defensive line, for example. And then the third linebacker is important, and the nickel is important, and those positions we have not been able to get right since Michael Carter got injured. Excuse me. But they should have been better than what they were putting out there. They shouldn't have been getting their tail kicked the way they were. That's too much talent on one field to be as bad as they were. They were going to be bad, and we weren't going to win games, but it shouldn't have been this bad. I mean, this is really bad. So, had to be done. Now, who could be the replacements? Well, Chris Harris is getting an audition. Now, who's Chris Harris? And this is someone that at least 2 journalists has called a rising star. So, Chris Harris, been called a rising star by Zach Rosenblather, and also Burt Breer. Now, Burt Breer is a guy who's from New England, so he could be joshing us. And he also is a graduate of Ohio State, so when you hear him talk about college football, it's always going to be slanted toward Ohio State. And with the NFL, he's always going to have an affinity for the Patriots. So he could be messing with us. But Rosenblatt also said the same thing. But who knows? Maybe he's being paid off by Chris Harris's agent, which does happen. So we don't know. We'll see what it looks like. And Glenn and Harris are going to put their heads together, and we'll see what they come up with. Maybe they go back to the old Glenn system that they were supposed to run, training in the early days of training camp before Wilks apparently convinced Glenn to do a combo thing or whatever he convinced him to do. And maybe we'll see what this defense was supposed to be all along. Now, other contenders for the job, Al Harris of the Bears has been mentioned, has a very similar resume as Chris Harris, oddly. But the Bears are a team that gets a lot of turnovers, and we have a little problem there. Then you got Jimmy Leonhard of the Broncos. He's very well thought of, another up-and-comer. He, of course, is a former Jet under the Rex Ryan era and was a great safety himself and has a lot of good experience, Jim Leonhard. Then you have people who might get fired, like Raheem Morris, close with AG. Jim Schwartz of the Browns, don't know why they'd get rid of him, but you never know. If they did, we should snap him up quick. Not that he'd want to come here, but because Jim Schwartz could probably have any open job that he wants. And another name in the NFL is Christian Parker on the Eagles. Now, I started looking at some of who are the best defensive coordinators in college. People like Phil Parker of Iowa, but he's 62 years old, probably doesn't want to come here. But Phil Parker of Iowa, if we could, right out of central casting, just like a hard-nosed, no-nonsense, what the fuck are you talking about? Only thing I do is coach defense guy. Phil Parker of Iowa is that guy. But he's perfect for Iowa. Now, you think about Iowa. They don't always get the most talent. I mean, sometimes they get like an All-American type, but, they don't have talent like the way LSU, Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, these teams, Oregon, they don't get that kind of depth of talent, and yet their defense is always hard-nosed and play it to the end and punch you in the mouth and all this. So he would be perfect, but he's probably not leaving Iowa. And all of these people in college probably not leaving. Jim Knowles just signed a deal to go to Tennessee. Pete Kwiatkowski from Texas. Glenn Schumann from Georgia. And an interesting one, what about Winky Dink Martindale? You think Wink Martindale wants to hang out in Michigan while they have all these scandals going on? And he had to work for this person, Sharon Moore, who had a lot of shortcomings, let's say. Don't you think Winky Dink wants to come back to the NFL? And wouldn't he want to come back to New York where he had a falling out with Brian Daboll? But that was about Daboll, the hothead. It wasn't about New York or the Giants, really. That That was about clashing with Daboll, which actually tells you more about Daboll than Martindale. So we'd have to pay him a lot, but maybe Wink Martindale wants to come back to the NFL. That was somebody we should be interested in. So those are some names, but first up is the audition for Chris Harris, and maybe we just keep him, and he's the guy. So that'd be interesting. Also on the Connor Hughes Country Club Connor podcast they did today with his butt buddy there, Zach. He said anonymous players said there was a lack of adjustments when the game had started by old Steve Wilks. So maybe he's great at drawing it up before the game starts, but then when unexpected bullets start flying, he's not good at changing it up. And yeah, that seems right. That's based on what we watched, that crap we watched. So maybe Glenn and this Chris Harris, maybe they'll be better with that. We got to watch and see. Now, Connor also said this is not a Woody move, as opposed to other times when the Jets were at a different place. Woody starts getting antsy once you're in like year 3, 4 of your rebuild and you're supposed to be winning. Then he starts getting antsy. Then he starts meddling. We're in year 1 now, so he's not going to meddle now. And so, of course, he must have signed off on it because he's got to continue paying Wilks. But this was an AG move. AG has full autonomy, and that's just the way it is. Now, here's an interesting perspective, the kind of thing that you come to FSBN for. Frankie from Flatbush, exclusive thought. Here it is. And why you should subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to the channel, please. Because I give you ideas like this that nobody else does. What if this was the plan all along? Yes. What if Aaron Glenn said, this Chris Harris, he is a rising star? What if it actually is true what Zach Rosenblather and Bert Breer, take it in the rear, said? That he really is a rising star, but he wasn't quite ready yet, similar to the Ben Johnson situation again in Detroit. Remember, Dan Campbell said, I got this guy, Ben Johnson. He's fantastic, but he may not be ready, so I got to call the plays in the meantime. What if this is a similar situation? We thought, okay, Chris Harris, he's not ready to be the DC yet, so I need a interim, and let me go get Steve Wilks because he'll be my sounding board. He's got experience. He knows the head coaching thing. I could use him that way, and then he'll be the DC, but at some point it'll probably all go to crap. And then once I, Aaron Glenn, am situated, I feel good. I got the hang of this head coaching thing. Goodbye to Wilksy. Hello to Chris Harris. What if that was the plan all along? Now, there's evidence for this being the case. The Jets planned, for example, a long time ago, that they might be able to trade Sauce Gardner and Garrett Wilson. They've traded one so far, and they planned for that by building the contracts in a way where it was good for the player, but not overly so, good for themselves, but not overly so, and good for the club that would be acquiring the contract in the future, potentially, but not overly so. So fair all around, and by doing that, made the contract very attractive to somebody who want to make a trade, and therefore we could get more for those players. Now, that's sort of like an example of future planning that this regime did. And so what if this is similar? We got this Chris Harris guy. Okay, not ready yet. Okay, we'll get Wilks for the interim. He's the king of the one and dones anyway. It'll be good for Wilks. He'll get a lot of money, and then he'll get fired, and then he'll continue to get money from Woody while he's on the beach, drinking a pina colada. No problem. And he's close to retirement age anyway, and I can benefit from his experience while he's here. And then when it's all said and done, we'll get Chris Harris in there after a little bit of seasoning, and now he's there. Interesting thought, isn't it? And maybe that's just the way they planned it this whole time. All right, so that's it about the Wilks getting wilksed. He got wilksed.